all the fees involved and additional costs that you should be anticipating when you're filing for your EB-5 visa. And we're going to break them down and what they mean and which parts you have to source and which ones you don't have to source. So as always, nothing I'm giving you guys here on these live sessions are considered legal advice. So you should be consulting with your individual attorneys pertaining to your legal advice, pertaining to your specific case, and also with licensed project brokers regarding your options on projects. But I am here to give you information and information that should help you ask the right questions when you're speaking to your legal professionals. So let's get started. I'm just going to adjust the light just because I feel like we're having a little bit of a technical issue. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's talk about fees and costs of the EB-5 program. Generally speaking, your investment amount is probably going to be $800,000 as long as you invest in a targeted employment area. I should note that the vast majority of EB-5 petitions are filed through targeted employment areas. The absolute vast majority of regional centers are developing projects or financing projects in targeted employment areas. So most investors today, their minimum investment requirement is $800,000. So let's first talk about the cost of actually the difference between an $800,000 investment and $1,050,000, and then we will talk about additional costs. So as many of you know, if you are investing in a targeted employment area, your minimum investment amount is $800,000. If you're investing in a not targeted employment area, so pretty much any other area, your minimum investment amount is $1,050,000. Sometimes I have investors who are new to this industry and they come and they ask me if it's a good idea to invest in projects that are not in targeted employment areas. So they would have to put up $250,000 more money, put $250,000 more at risk. And a common question from investors is it better to invest in a non-targeted area? Because there is some misconception in the public that targeted employment areas are either economically depressed or that some of the projects available in those areas are worse in quality than those projects available in targeted employment areas or non-targeted. And so I want to resolve kind of this misconception. What we're seeing in practice is actually the opposite. So because companies that are not new to this industry, they understand the requirements, they understand the definitions of a targeted area. Experienced regional centers intentionally look for quality projects in targeted zones. Experienced regional centers do not usually even consider a project that is located outside of a targeted employment area. Why? Because they understand that raising funds for a project like that is going to be harder. Investors are going to invest more. And so in practice, not only do we see that the vast majority of projects are in targeted zones where the minimum investment amount is only $800,000, but in my personal experience, both as an attorney and then as a licensed investment broker, in the vast majority of times, if I hear that a project is being financed through EB-5 and it is not located in a targeted zone, so you need to invest $1,050,000, typically that means the regional center is new, the developer is new, and it's a group that is very unfamiliar with the EB-5 process. So from a risk perspective, I have seen, again, I am summarizing many deals that I have seen. Typically, when I have seen a deal that comes out that is not in a targeted employment area, it actually carries higher risk because it's usually the regional center is brand new or the organization is new and they're just not that familiar with the EB-5 world and rules, and that's why they're trying to finance a project outside of a targeted area with EB-5. So again, a very huge misconception that projects in targeted areas are less safe, and projects outside of targeted areas that require a larger investment are safer. That's definitely a misconception. Every deal is obviously different. You should be looking at the specifics of the deal, but overall, some of the stronger deals, from collateral, from construction completion, from how they were structured, some of the stronger deals I've ever seen in the market were all in targeted zones. So first, how much do you really need to invest? I'm going to say realistically you need to invest 800,000. Unless you find some very unique project that you absolutely love that's located in that area where you need to invest $1,050,000, the vast majority of projects, and the vast majority of projects, in my opinion, that carry more protections and are better structured, the vast majority of them are located in targeted zones. So when we look at EB-5 projects, we're talking about the minimum investment amount, which today, in the summer of 2026, is 800,000. So that's how much you need to invest. Then what are the additional costs that accompany this program? So the additional costs is money that you pay that you have no expectation to get back. Your investment, when you make your investment, you have an expectation to get that money back. So you're either lending or investing that money as an equity into a project, with the developer expected to repay you once the project is built and sold or is refinanced. So that's your investment. Your costs are additional fees that accompany this program that you don't expect to get back. And there are three main fees and three main costs that accompany this program. Number one, your legal fees that you're going to pay to your immigration attorneys. So your attorneys will have to put together your individual petition. They have to source your individual funds. These are fees that you pay them for their work, and they're not refundable. Again, some investors try to hire their attorneys on a contingency success based. I don't know any immigration attorneys right now that would take a case like this, because obviously they are getting paid for the work that they do. They cannot guarantee always the result, because the result also depends on your individual documents, your individual background history, but also the interpretation of USAS. So legal fees are paid to the attorney for the work that they do, and it's not attached to the outcome. So you do want to find very good, strong professionals that are doing the best possible job for you. But these are fees that you pay that you do not expect to get back. So your legal fees is what you're going to pay to your attorneys. I don't want to price set. So my recommendation is, when you are discussing legal fees, you can get quotes from multiple law firms just to get an understanding of the range. And also, when you are getting a quote from the law firm, please actually review the agreement and see what it includes. Because one law firm may quote you a legal fee for the initial petition I-5 to 6 and the I-9 and the RFE responses, where the other law firm is only quoting you the initial I-5 to 6 fee. So make sure you compare apples to apples when you're comparing legal fees, and you actually understand the steps of the program and you get those fees. So your legal fees are your initial cost. The second cost is government filing fees. Expect to pay multiple government filing fees as you go through the program. Again, today we're in July of 2026. Your initial filing fee for the I-5 to 6 is $3,675. That is just your initial filing fee. You also have a government filing fee, that is roughly around $2,000, and that's for each family member if you're also doing concurrent adjustment. And there's also a $1,000 fraud fee. So your initial fee for just the I-5 to 6 is going to be close to $5,000, and that's your government filing fee. Also, you don't get that back. And then each additional family member is about roughly $2,000 in additional fees if you're filing a concurrent adjustment. So you can do that calculation to see how much that means for your individual family. Keep in mind also, as you go through this program, after you get your initial green card, you don't have to take any steps for 2 years, but 2 years later, you will have to remove conditions through a filing called I-829. The I-829 filing fee is also substantial. Today, it's close to $9,000. but that could change and it could increase in the future, right? Actually, USA has already increased those fees in the past. Then they got sued because they uh, didn't implement the right procedure when they were increasing the fees. So the fees were reduced, but their intention is to increase those fees. So keep in mind that you may be starting the process today and the I-29 fee is one amount. It may increase in the future, so you may have to pay those additional fees when you go to remove conditions. But generally speaking, what I have observed in EB-5, per unit, so per investor, their government filing fees are going to be between 15,000, actually, I'm sorry, between about 17,000 for just one investor family to about 25 to 30,000 if you have additional family members. And that's cumulative government filing fees through the life of the process, so about 4 years total. So anywhere between like $17,000 and $30,000, depending how many family members. That's your government filing fees. And next, so you have your immigration attorney's legal fees, government filing fees, and next you have your regional center administrative fees. Now, if you are investing through a regional center, the regional centers typically charge a one-time flat administrative fee when you invest into their project. And the reason why the regional centers charge that fee is because your entire minimum investment amount has to go into a job creating project. So the regional center takes in your minimum investment amount of say 800,000. They have to put it in a project and they have to account for it. They cannot use any of that money towards their own regional center administrative fees, legal fees, fundraising costs, marketing costs. So the regional center operations either have to be paid by future income that the regional center may make on the money that you have lent to the developer, like from interest payments from the developer, or the initial costs are often covered by this administrative fee that they charge each investor when they enter. So that's why regional centers historically started these fees, because when they start a project, they need to raise a lot of money that they're going to deploy to the developer, and then they're not going to get any fees from the developer for many years. Sometimes it's for a year, sometimes it's for 2 years. And so to offset their fundraising costs, which they incur in the beginning, they started charging this administrative fee. Now, regional center administrative fees do vary quite substantially. Today in 2026, we're seeing that many regional centers in their documents, they set their fees as high as $70,000 or $80,000. And depending on the project, sometimes it's a flat fee. Sometimes those fees are reduced as they are continuing their fundraising efforts and if they require less capital. So keep in mind though, you have your legal fees, your government filing fees, and regional center administrative fees. In total, at the very, very least, right? If you have some very, very favorable regional center administrative fees, a family will end up spending an additional $70,000 for the legal, government, and admin fees per process. And that's going to be per the investor, per the whole family. Each additional family member adds very little cost to the process because you're just paying essentially a couple $1,000s in the administrative fees and a few $1,000s to your attorneys, right? The brunt of the cost is borne by the very first petitioner. So I would say probably the least cost that I have seen for an investor going through this process after they paid all the legal, government, and regional center fees was in the vicinity of $70,000. But for the majority of families, for the majority of projects, that additional cost, in addition to your investment, is between 100 and maybe 120,000. Right? So keep that in mind. and again, depending on the project, sometimes those are a little bit more, sometimes they're a little bit less. But generally, the cost, the non-refundable cost of doing this program, in addition to the $800,000 investment, is about 100 to 120,000 for most families. So another thing that should be mentioned, any fees paid to the regional center have to be sourced just the same way as you source the lawful source of funds. So $800,000 has to be sourced, the administrative fee has to be sourced and documented in your petition. At this stage, again in 2026, your legal fees and your government filing fees do not have to be sourced, so they can be paid from other sources you're not documenting in your petition. So that's helpful. I hope this session helps for you guys to anticipate what your costs are. So I would say at the very, very, very minimal, anticipate that your additional costs with EB-5 are going to be $70,000. For most projects and most family structures, it's more around $100,000 to $120,000. Again, some of it is broken up over 4 years because some of the government fees you don't pay until 4 years or so have passed in the process. But the vast majority of these costs are going to be paid upfront together with your investment amount. So when you're preparing for your investment, prepare for an $800,000 minimum investment amount plus about $100,000 in costs. The vast majority of that is going to be paid at the initial stage. And also a big portion of that, whatever you pay as a regional center administrative fee, does have to be sourced. And so that's kind of to help prepare. And that's for your cash. Also keep in mind that EB-5 is not a liquid investment. You're tying up your money for years and you cannot just ask for it back at any time you want. So this is not a checking account. This is not even a CD where you committed your money to a certain amount, but if you need to withdraw it earlier, you can if you pay a penalty. It's a completely liquid investment. The money goes into the construction or the development of the project. It's being spent. So if you change your mind about moving forward with the process, you cannot just write to the regional center at a whim a year or two later and say, you know what, I've changed my mind, can I have my money back? And have the expectation that they will return it. Now, you can always request it if they have the ability to replace you with another investor or whatever their legal documents say. It is possible that they may return your money, either at discretion or because they have the liquidity or because they were able to replace you with another investor. But there is no legal obligation. And oftentimes there's no practical ability for them to do so. So because it's in a liquid investment, do also just keep in mind that you want to have a source of income that is completely independent from your EB-5 funds. So if before you were living off of an interest of your EB-5 funds and now you're making an EB-5 investment, you need to make sure you have a source of income that is independent from your EB-5 investment so you can maintain your lifestyle while that money is locked up. So costs of essentially $70,000 to $120,000, your liquidity needs, your ongoing liquidity needs. And then last thing that I should mention is opportunity cost. So this is not cash out that you have to pay when you're making an investment, but when you're calculating whether or not EB-5 is the right choice for you, if it's the right solution for you and for your family, you also want to factor in the opportunity cost of that money. Why do I say that? The most EB-5 projects today pay an interest rate to EB-5 investors that is less than 1% annually. So not only are you locking up at least $800,000 for a prolonged period of time, but you're receiving nominal interest rate. So less than 1% for most projects, some pay a quarter, some pay 0.5%. Now, that's something also to consider. If you were to invest that money in stocks or even if we're talking about some like a little bit more low risk investments such as government bonds or annuities, you are expecting to receive between 4, 5, sometimes 6% annually, right? 5% annually on, $800,000, we're talking about $40,000. You multiply that by 4 years, it's 160,000. So that's your opportunity cost of what this money could have been earning for you, but instead it's going to be in an EB-5 project. So that's another cost that investors should consider, right? There's out-of-pocket costs in addition to 800,000, and there's the fact that that money is earning nominal interest rate. So it's not, for the majority of investments, it's not going to be a situation where you invested that money and the profit from the EB-5 project is going to cover those costs. The reality is the profit from most EB-5 projects is absolutely nominal. So it's not going to cover your expenses, and you're not going to derive any substantial income over the next 2 years. You will probably derive something. Again, it could be a quarter, 0.5%, sometimes 1%, but it's usually not something very substantial. So those are your costs and fees to consider when you're embarking on the EB-5 program. I think it's really important to have all of these upfront so you can make the right decision for your family. I think EB-5 has been a phenomenal solution for a lot of families, but it's obviously not the right solution for every family. So do consider the cost before you move forward. Just by comparison, if you look at a lot of other international programs, their investment amount usually exceeds $1 million US. There are countries whose minimum investment amount is $2 million. Sometimes it's $1 million. They also come with fees and costs. So you may want to do different country comparison if you are more flexible. If your goal, of course, is to come to the United States, then you want to specifically look at EB-5 costs. And also sometimes my clients do a comparison into their income opportunities here versus their home country. So an investor who knows that they're going to pay out-of-pocket costs of 100,000+ for their EB-5 process, plus they will have an opportunity cost of that money not earning interest for a few years. But if they are located in the United States and they get a green card, their annual income increases by 200,000 or 300,000. That makes a huge difference, right? So in the 4 years that your EB-5 money is invested, if your annual income was boosted by $800,000, that tends to offset a lot of the costs of the EB-5 program. And that's why I say it's a different program for everybody. There are some people who benefit more from it and other people who benefit less. And it's definitely a personal calculation that you want to do. But I hope this video was helpful. Now you understand the practical out-of-pocket costs for each EB-5 applicant are going to be legal fees, government filing fees, and administrative fees. Cumulatively, at least $70,000 to about $120,000. That's the range, plus the opportunity cost of your money. But I should also mention before I leave you guys that this is a calculation that a lot of international families do. If you are applying for a green card and your petition is approved, one of the nice benefits of EB-5 is when you're a green card holder, your children can qualify for a lot of top US universities as in-state residents. So depending on which state you move to, which universities they have there. But when your child qualifies for in-state tuition versus out-of-state tuition, that difference in tuition can be, it usually is at least $20,000, but for some universities, the tuition difference is $50,000. Like, I'll give you an example that I studied at the University of Michigan. My tuition, this was 20 years ago, but my tuition was somewhere around 12 to 18,000 a year because I was an in-state U.S. green card holder at the time. And I was an in-state resident, so my tuition was about $12 to $18,000. An out-of-state tuition for an international student would have been about $40,000. So that was like a 20 plus $1,000 per year difference. Today, an out-of-state tuition at University of Michigan is around $80,000. And I believe that in state is, I don't quote me on this, but it's somewhere around 20. So that gap has only widened. And there are some universities where the difference between being a green card holder and in-state resident and being an international student is about 50,000 a year. Obviously, that's a massive cost. So if you have two children that you're planning to send to university in the United States, you're talking about potential savings of $200,000 per child. So again, huge potential savings for a lot of families who do some advanced planning, and that can help offset some of the costs that they're paying for EB-5. And sometimes it ends up being a net positive investment for them, especially if I have three kids that are planning to go to university in the United States, and these are going to be state schools, not private schools. And some of our top universities in the US are state schools. So if I have three children that are planning to attend, the tuition difference between going as international students versus going as domestic students can be as vast for these three kids as $600,000, right? So as an individual, if I apply for a green card for myself as a parent while my children are under the age of 21, so the children would be included in a family petition, obtain the green card. By the time they go to university, that's going to be a very different profile. So we're still paying for university. We're just not paying as much as international students are. So things to consider, and some pros and cons. Send this video to whoever you think it's going to benefit, and comment, like, share, and of course post questions that you want me to discuss and topics in EB-5 that you want me to discuss during the next Instagram or YouTube live. Thank you.